Alright. Hopefully this is working and we have sound and everything else that's important. And yeah, let's do this thing. Let's write a game. So first of all, I guess I better explain the game that I'm making. In fact, I can show you the game I'm making, which is kind of weird because if I can show it to you, then it must already exist, right? Well, so there's a little bit of backstory. This is a game that I helped work on. I collaborated on with 4 other people. It's called Trains, and it's just a bit fun. You put down some trucks, you put down some trains, it's all good. And this was about 4 years ago, and it's written in TypeScript. It's got a Ruby backend, so the backend doesn't do much, but it was great fun. And it sort of captured the imagination of a few of us who were all working together. As you can see, it has a lighting engine, and it has smoke, and it's amazing. I didn't write that bit. And it was just lots of fun. And I've sort of wanted to expand it and improve it over the years, and so this is Trains 2, which is my fork of it. I took the TypeScript and stripped out the Ruby, and it's just a static HTML page, but I started to work on it, and I wanted to fix up, change some features that I didn't sort of like or wanted to do differently, because it wasn't my idea originally. It was a friend of mine, James. He shall be forever honoured in every variation of this, but I wanted to do a version of it, and that's all cool. I've started, but something about being in TypeScript, it never grabbed me. I never sort of went back to it, and so I thought, well, I'm going to start again. So the project that I'm starting on is to write or rewrite Trains in .NET Core, because I like .NET Core, in C# because I like C#, and just see how we go. Bring in some more modern dev things, maybe. I definitely want to do things like unit tests, because the bit that I wrote, or especially I'm proud of, is things like this drawing code, where as you draw a track, it works out what to do. And that's kind of, well, it was tricky, and it was buggy, and it was very much trial and error. It's not that you can't do tests in TypeScript, but I don't know, it feels like that's a trap you fall into, is very casual TypeScript, let's say. So I'm going to be more strict. Hello, Gork. I'm going to be more strict about some of that stuff in C#. And along the way, I'm just going to talk about what I'm doing. I don't even know if I'll get to write any code today, because the first thing I want to talk about is projects, which is what I work on. And I've learnt a heap in the last year about them, and so that's what we're going to start with. So without further ado, though, let's file new project this thing. I'm using Visual Studio 2019. I'm not going to show anything that is like paid, so there you go. Now, what type of project do we want? I'm going to start with a Windows Forms project, and that's maybe controversial. Maybe people are wondering why. I will explain, I promise. I'll call it trains.net. I expect that name to change eventually. So why Windows Forms? Well, so the real thing this game is going to be written in is C#, obviously, and I'm going to use a library called Skier, which is a open source port or wrapper, I'm not sure actually, of Google's Skier drawing library. Skier is sort of maintained by Mono, part of the Mono group of stuff. So it's, well supported, etc. And it has bindings for everything. Hey Jim. Hey Mitch. It has bindings for everything. WPF, Winforms, even Blazor, so you can put this on the web. So the theory that I've got to go for, is that Skier is my sort of common language that I'll be using. And then on top of that, the Winforms bit will be a very thin UI, but I'm using Winforms just because it's really easy to get up and running quickly. But anyway, the first thing I'm going to do is make our project structure, because I want to kind of get that right from the start, and there's a few little tricks that I think are cool that I don't think necessarily many people know about, but yeah, I think they're cool. So let's get rid of this guy. So we have a trains.net, fine. We're gonna have a few projects here, right? I'm gonna split it up. We're gonna have a layer at the bottom, which is our sort of game engine, which controls things like track placement and direction and how the trains work. We're going to have our rendering engine on top of that, which is what's going to use Ski Sharp. And we're going to have our UI at the very top, which is really thin Winforms. So let's just start, and I'm going to add in a project for let's add in a project for our rendering. So we can add I want a .NET Standard class library, which is that one. And I'm going to call it trains.net.rendering. I don't want to do that. Great. So if you missed how I did that, it was Control Q to get up to search. You can just sort of jump around to things. Cool. So this is trains.net.rendering. It's .NET Standard, so it's a new project format, which is cool. And I want one more. So trains.net is our UI. I want another .NET Standard class library for our sort of game logic, and because puns, I'm going to call it trains.net.engine. And I need a reference from, where do I need references? I guess rendering has to reference engine, and then UI, well, probably going to reference both. So we have this little graph here, right? Now, what I also want to do is use modern things. So, for example, if I write a method here just to demonstrate, I'm going to go string x equals hello. I can go x question mark equals hi there. I should make that wrong. So, the question mark equals is a C# 8 feature. And what this is saying is coalescing assignment, which is what this is not available in 7.3. So these projects are currently using 7.3. And that's because it's targeting .NET Standard 2, not .NET Standard 2.1. So I can fix that by making that .NET Standard 2.1, which is fine. I'm using .NET Core, I will be using .NET Core 3, I'm guessing. Oh, 3.1 even. That's a bit too fancy. Let's go down to 3. So I could do that, that's fine. But the other way to specify what language to use is I can specify a lang version. And in fact, I do want to do this because I always want the preview lang version. And whatever that is, so it's 8.1, 8.2, whatever's in the future, I always want the best, or the newest, let's say. And so I can specify that here, and I can specify that here, and I can specify that here. And it's kind of annoying, but it works. My question mark equals now works, right? It compiles properly. This is just complaining because it's unused. So we're on C# 8, that's great. But I really don't like all of that repetitive stuff, right? It's the same as source code. You don't want to have unnecessarily repetitive code. And so I think project files, I think of them as code, and I think everyone should. And I'm very biased when I say that. So there's a way we can achieve this level of code reuse in our project files, though. So how do we do it? Let's talk about something different. Let me do this. Let's see if this fanciness will work. All right. So what we have is a directory structure. So we have our root directory. And then under that, I currently have this in a code directory. And then under that, I have a trains.net directory. Sorry about my handwriting. And then under that, I have my engine, right, .proj, and I have my rendering.proj. And so these two projects have something I want to refactor essentially, but I want to put something common. And so what I can do, there's a feature of Msbuild where if I create a file, I can get some reuse happening automatically. What Msbuild does, if I say build engine.proj, right, or if VS says build engine.proj, and it does that as part of building a solution, doesn't matter how, Msbuild will go and find this directory where engine.proj is, and it will look in this directory for a file with a special name. The file is called directory.build.props. And if it exists, it will import it into the project. If it doesn't find that file, it will look in the parent directory in trains.net for directory.build.props and import it. And if that doesn't exist, it'll look in code. And if that doesn't exist, it'll look in the root directory. So it goes all the way up the stack looking for this specially named file. And as soon as it finds one, it stops. So what that means is if we have common things that are common between these two projects, we can put a file in this directory here, we can put that file in, and express some commonalities. So let's do that. If we open up in File Explorer, and that's a little big. So if we go to trains.net directory here, we can see our projects, and I can very easily just add a file here called directory.build.props. Yes. And let's add it into our solution. I'm just doing add existing item, even though it's off screen, sorry. And we'll add that file. So it's empty at the moment, but it is a Msbuild project file. So just like these ones, we have a project. So this is going to be imported at the top of every project within our little structure. So essentially, it'll go here. So we don't need to define SDK in it because that's already defined. All we need, where's my simple one, is we need basically the bits we want to be common. And I don't want that. Okay. So if I open that up, hopefully, yeah, there we go. Looks better. So what we have now is in our trains.net, we have this directory to build the props. And this is saying for every project that is in this directory or any directory underneath this directory, it will use lang version preview. So I can go through and I can remove these specific instances here, and our code still compiles, right? We're still using C#8. So we get to keep our project files being really nice and neat, but we can still express once some rules for our project. Now, I can't move target framework, and there's two reasons for that. The first reason is these aren't all not .NET Standard, right? These two are .NET Standards. This one is a .NET Core because it's our Windows Forms app. But also because of the way Visual Studio works, it specifically looks for target framework in your project file to know how to open your file, how to open your project. So if I remove this, this is going to fall back to the legacy project system, and the legacy project system has that huge project file. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, if we go to Visual P, I think. This just happens to be a legacy project I happen to have on GitHub. It's probably the only one I haven't upgraded yet. So if I don't have target frameworks, it falls back to assuming the project looks like this. You'll see this doesn't have a target framework or a target frameworks attribute. It has target framework version. So that's kind of the key that Visual Studio uses. And so it will assume it looks like this, which means it it loads a whole different project system. But I mean, you can even also just see how nice and neat our new project files are, right? They're really cool. So we've expressed language version. That's great. There's one other thing I want to express, and that is I want to use the new nullable feature in C#8. So I want to enable the nullability flow analysis, I guess, which is just that nullable enable. So now we have our project structure. I'm actually just going to go and I can delete. Can't delete that one. Delete these files. All right. So the next step in our setup, there's one more thing that I want every project to have. I want every project to have a set of analyzers. I don't have any analyzers at the moment, which is annoying. Analyzers are kind of like just, the same as the compiler checks and errors you get. Analyzers can apply additional, analysis over the top of your code. And there's a sort of standard one, or there's a package called Microsoft FXCop Analysis, or FXCop Analyzers. If we go to NuGet, actually, it's even in project properties now. I think. Yeah. So this package is the sort of recommended set. This is what pretty much sort of mirrors the old FXCop executable that if you used to run that, it would run over the top. So this new package is the recommended package, and that's why there's a one-click analyzer here, one-click install button. And I can click that, and that will install to this project, trains.net. If I have a look at, so I've now got that installed. If I have a look at my project file, you can see I have a package reference, and it's version 2.0.3. That's great. So this is another bit of commonality that I want to remove, or at least I want to have common, right? I want all of my projects to have these analyzers. So at first glance, I can do this. Put that there, and you'll see the analyzers gone away. And put it back, save, and the analyzers should come back again. Once it downloads package, there we are. So I can do this. This works great, but there's more nuance to packages often. So to demonstrate that, we need another reference here. So what we also want in this project is ski#. Can't type. So I want ski# to be referenced because that's what I'm going to use for my drawing. But I don't want it in this trains.net.engine. I've actually opened up the wrong one here, which is an unintended but awesome example. I need it in my rendering project, of course, because that's what we're going to use to do the drawing, is ski#. So, fine, I'll install that. But I don't want my engine to be tied to my rendering platform, right? It doesn't really matter in this project, but it's good practice. So this, once it's downloaded, this will give me a, hello? Still going. So this is downloading, packages and stuff. So I don't want this to be referenced by my engine project. It's needed by my Windows Forms app probably, because there's probably going to be some, some interop there between when you click in Windows, it's going to have to tell something. So I probably want it in here. And yeah, I want it in here. Okay, this is not working. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll just do it manually. So I could do this. And then what I'm going to have is I'm going to have the same problem where I want this to be expressed once, but not everywhere. And so directory.build.props, if I include something here, it's going to be included everywhere. So how do we solve it? Oh, there we are. It was just downloading. Yeah, now I've confused it. Okay, so how do I fix this problem, right? I don't want to include it everywhere, but I'd still like to not have to repeat it everywhere bar one project. And so the way this can work is we need to know a little bit more about how Msbuild works, for starters, and also a little bit more about this magical directory.build.props thing. So if we switch back to here, there's one other thing that happens. So we go looking for directory.build.props, and we look in our parent directory, etc. And then we import that, and we have our project. And then there's one more step, and that is at the bottom, we go looking for another file called directory. You know what? I'm just going to not bother with my horrible writing, but directory.build.targets. So the convention with Msbuild is that props is first, targets is last. And so you'll see this if you look inside your .NET Core SDKs that are installed on your machine, for example. So this SDK, there is a Microsoft.NET.SDK.props file somewhere on my machine, and a Microsoft.NET.SDK.targets file on my machine. Props is imported first, targets is imported second. So by placing this file, we get at the end in here, we get the contents of that file. So why is that important? Well, for that, we need to scrub all of this out. And let's talk about Msbuild Items. So Msbuild Items are things in your project. And the most common one is a file, right? If I have a, compile include equals, foo.cs, that's an item in Msbuild. And so you can imagine as Msbuild's processing your project, or evaluating it's called, it will go and find that file, and it'll add that to essentially a dictionary. Right? Foo.cs is the key to the dictionary, and then the values in the dictionary is the various bits of metadata you can put onto a file. So you can put generators and custom tools and all sorts of stuff. But it's essentially a dictionary. And so as well as include, which is like add to the dictionary, we can also say compile update. And we can update foo.cs, which is essentially updating our foo.cs entry. And so let's say, we have a generator or something, if we wanted it to be generated. And so as Msbuild reads your file, and reads your project file, including any imports, etc., it goes through, and as it discovers these items that you mentioned, if you include something, it'll add it to its dictionary. If you update something, it'll go and update that entry in the dictionary. So you can split up any item definition amongst as many XML elements in the project file, or imports, as you like. And so knowing this trick, and knowing about directory build targets, we can get our package references done in a really nice way. So let's first of all create a targets file. And I'll explain why these have to go to targets in a second. And we'll add it to our solution. Onto there. Alright, and again, it's the project. And I'll just open it so it looks nice. Alright, so let's grab our #sharp reference and we'll remove it from there. Just show you that it has gone. And now if I paste it in here, this is going to be included in every project because this file is imported by every project that is under it. So trains.net.engine is importing this file. This file says to include this package reference, so that's not doing what we want it to do. But what we can do is we can change this to update. And I can save now. And so when we import this file, or when Msbuild imports this file and processes trains.net.engine, it's going to see this update for a package reference called #sharp. And it's going to look in its dictionary, and there's not going to be anything there because we haven't included it anywhere. So now what we can do is go back to rendering, and we can include #sharp because we want to reference it, but we don't need the version. So this is going to add to our dictionary. We're going to get essentially an empty entry. If that's all we did, this wouldn't work because it wouldn't know what version to use. But later, we import our targets, we update that dictionary entry, and we specify a version. So doing it this way, I have centralized management of my versions because I've only got one spot. I don't have to specify this version in trains.net and trains.net.rendering. All I have to do is opt in each project to that package. And automatically any other metadata about that package will come with it. So why do we do it in targets? Well, we do it in targets because I want it to be an opt-in model, and the order in which things are imported is important for that. So if I were to import this project in this package reference in props, then I would have an opt-out model where I could remove from a project here rather than include. But I want to include in the project first and then update in the target. So it's just the order in which things happen. And of course, if you had the update in the props, until you've added the dictionary entry, nothing's going to happen. So that doesn't work. And the opt-out method might work depending on your situation, because like if you've got a package that's used by every project except one, you might want to do that. But it's a little bit weird. It's a little bit harder to discover which projects have it if you're looking in the files, because you've got to, it's the absence of the thing that tells you. But so that's how we're going to do that. So I can also now, like I know I want the ScareSharp Windows Forms library as well, right? I want the same version, so it's really nice that these two things are next to each other. In fact, I can make them look like this. So I know if I ever come in here and move this up to 154, it's going to be immediately obvious to me that I want to do the other ScareSharp packages as well. And then same thing, I go into my Windows Forms project. Whoops. And I just opt in to this package here. So now this has two ScareSharp references. This one has one ScareSharp reference, and this one should have none. So, all works. Cool. I can still, though, what I really wanted was this include, and I can still do that. So I want this package to be in every project. I can just include it. It absolutely works. In fact, I'm just going to... So we get to decide in this file, that's the wrong thing. We get to decide need to be opted in. So we get to decide what packages each project has in this file fully. Now, yeah, I could opt out of this, but what I can't do with this is I can't update it. So I can't have a project override the version here because this is imported last. So you need to sort of think about the layering of how those things. Msbuild basically reads from the start to the end. But yeah, so that's how I like to specify my packages anyway, because essentially this file becomes my centralized package management. And in fact, what I really want to do, and I will do right now, is I would have a build folder here for buildy type stuff. I would rename this to packages.targets, put it in there, and I would have a new text document, which is my actual build.targets. And I'm just going to import that one I just created. I've forgotten project, yes. Normally it's include, and my brain just stopped working for a second. And so this is build/packages.targets. And so I like to think of this in the style of project files as code. I kind of like to think of this as essentially calling a method. Right? I have just defined a file called packages. This is where I keep my packages. So I want to call that method because I want everything to have packages. So in my build file, in my targets file that is included with every project, I will call the packages method to get all the packages. So that's the project layout. Now there's a bunch of warnings here, and hopefully they're in the error list. Yeah. Good old new 1701. And also, good old C8. So these are this is an analyzer result. This one isn't. This is a build error. This one's an analyzer result. And you can see I'm creating a form and I'm not calling disposed. That's completely valid. Analyzers are the things that sort of kick off these fixes. So the suggestions. And this one, annoyingly, doesn't have a suggestion I can use. But, what I probably want to do here is, I guess, go using one, and then I can do this. Now that's, disposing the main form in a Windows Forms app is actually unnecessary because this application run is going to block for the lifetime of your app, and as soon as your app exits, then your whole process gets torn down. Does this setup play nice with the NuGet package manager? No, that's the only downside. It doesn't. The tooling doesn't really know how to update these versions, so it's not. It might be broken. I actually haven't done it in a while. It might be broken, or if you go and update a version, it'll add an update in here, which doesn't really make sense. So no, that doesn't work. This is pretty much for if you don't want to use the UI, I guess. And that kind of makes sense because you need to not use the UI to set it all up. I personally still like it because, as I said, I think of these things as code. This is an 8-line long file. It's not very big. I can double click to open it. It's very, well, this one's a bit longer, but I like to keep these small. I like to keep them readable, just like code. So I don't mind using an editor for these. I don't really use the package management dialog directly, but that situation should improve in future. The tooling will get better because the way, so this system is not, I didn't invent it, obviously. Smarter people than me did, but this is, or a version of this is used by most of the .NET repositories out there on GitHub, like the official, .NET organization, .NET repositories on GitHub. There is one variation that they sometimes do, which is to have a variable here, so that, so for example, they would probably do this in a separate file. They would have something like skier sharp version defined as 1.68.1-3, and then in here, what they would actually do is, oops, wrong one. They would define that. My room is too dark and I can't see my keyboard. Skier sharp version. So yeah, they would do this. So then you get, even more reuse because I'm literally only specifying the version once. That probably, I wouldn't say never, but I don't think the tooling would ever really support that because this is where you get into Msbuild is a programming language ultimately, and so the tooling would have to find this reference. Okay, fine. The reference it can find, right? The reference is in here, but then it needs to find the version attribute, right, which is in here, and it needs to update that. So that little leap of logic doesn't do because it's got to go find this file wherever it is. This is also not part of your project, and pretty much everything in VS, well, everything in my world in the project system works at a project level. So updating this file affects the whole solution, which is outside the scope of what a project should really do anyway. So that gets a bit iffy. But then it would have to go find this version. It would have to know that the version came from a variable, which it can find out, but it sort of doesn't. It's not the main thing it uses, right? Mainly it wants the value of that variable. But so then it's got to go find the definition of that variable, and well, in this case it's in the same file, but it could be somewhere else, right? So this all gets a bit tricky. But yeah, I think it will improve, and certainly with, because so much now is in Git, I don't know, I feel like it's a bit easier to make, if you make a change to a random file that's not part of a project, I think you can be reasonably confident these days that it's going to get, it's going to go somewhere, it's not going to get missed or skipped. But I just do this. I would group these together, I would, as I said, I think of these as code, and therefore I put in comments. Right? So I would group all the related packages together. It's not that difficult. It is a little bit annoying not having the versions available, like the NuGet package manager gives you that drop down. That's useful, but that's life. So yeah, these warnings. That's right. So let's talk about these warnings. So the warnings are NuGet warnings, NuGet 1701, and basically what it's saying is, so Skier Sharp doesn't actually target .NET Core, it targets .NET Framework, and I'm targeting .NET Core, so that's a problem. But .NET Core can happily use these DLLs, that's why it's only a warning, and it's just saying, there might be some problems, and that's fair, because there might. It doesn't go and analyze these packages, but I'm pretty confident there isn't, so the only other thing I'm going to do in these projects as well is I'm just going to put in, no one, what is it saying one? Can't remember if I need the NU prefix. Looks like I do. And so that should just turn off that warning. Hopefully. Yeah, cool. As soon as you deviate from the standard, the manager gives up. Yes, what do you think about floating version numbers? So floating version numbers, I used to use these in a previous life because we had internal libraries, and I just went like, yes, just give me... Yeah, we were essentially using NuGet as a distribution mechanism, and we didn't really care about specific versions as much. The problem with floating version numbers is they just sort of ruin the build process. NuGet constantly has to reach out to the network to find out if there's a new version every time. In this example where I used to use them, they were internal packages, so it was worse because you had to be on the VPN to restore them. So you would open the project, and if you weren't on the VPN, I think it could build, but you had to wait for NuGet to time out, and that was just annoying. So they do work, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of floating versions. I sort of would rather have a bit more control over what I'm doing. Mainly it's just that thing of like, yeah, if I change this to an asterisk, every time I build, NuGet's going to have to go and check whether there's a 2.9.4. It knows I'm using 2.9.3 because that's baked into a file that it uses in the background, but it doesn't know what's out there. Alright, so what's next? Well, we have some more stuff to do. So I fixed this analysis, but it's kind of a bit useless, and there will be more useless analysis. So the last thing I want to set up is an editorconfig file. And then once I got an editorconfig file, then I think that's probably good. So let me grab my editorconfig file from somewhere that you can't see. She's not very exciting, but I keep it on my OneDrive. There we go. So if you haven't used editorconfig, you should, because it's awesome. What editorconfig does is it expresses a bunch of standards. It's an open format. It's not invented by .NET or VS or anything like that, but VS does support it, and Roslyn and all the analyzers should fully support it. But you can see, it specifies things like I want spaces, I want 4 spaces, I want a new line, fine, I want 2 spaces in CS Progs, like it's all very cool. But then the .NET compiler has sort of really embraced it, and so all of these things, like these are C# specific or .NET specific styling rules. And a lot of this is sort of style copy-ish, but it's not quite as aggressive. There's these naming rules. So, for example, they're very hard to read, but this basically says field should start with an underscore, static should start with an S underscore, interface should start with an I. So it will enforce all these things, and you can specify whether they're errors or whatever. There's a bunch of rules. So this is my sort of standard one that I'm pretty sure is right. Every now and again I notice something is wrong and I tweak it. But so by putting in this editor config, we've now got new errors, right? Just 2. That's pretty cool. And so this is saying I require access modifiers, and I like to have access modifiers. So the cool thing is that, as I said, a lot of the analyzers support this, so I can just one-click fix that. This is presumably the same problem. Yep. This is a bug because I've already installed this one, but I'm pretty sure that's been filed already. So that's kind of it. In theory, I'm now set up. I think these yellow warning errors will go away if I close and reopen. Let me just double check that. No one? Cool. So everything's happy. I've got my references, I've got SkiSharp, I've got my analyzers, I've got my coding style, I've got my editor config. All good. Let's send this to Git and I feel like I'm missing one. Okay. I think I'm missing a project, but that's okay. I plan to rename this project eventually anyway. So I'm going to add this solution to source control. And that's just initializing a Git repository and adding a git ignore file. And a git ignore file is designed for Visual Studio, and a git attributes file. And yeah, it's done an initial commit. Excellent. So I now need a repo to put it in. And I saw this new thing. You can go repo.new. Hey, look at that. Oh, that's pretty cool. Trains.net. Simple. Cool. Done. So there's my repository. And I will push to it by, guess I pressed that button. Did it? Wait. I don't want to create a repository. Let's do this one. This one I know works. Maybe I could have done that all for the UI. Anyway. So yeah, this should now have some code in it. Yay. Cool. So that's pretty good. I actually thought that would take me a whole hour to get all that set up before I could write the code, but I guess not. So yeah, if you have any questions or suggestions or feature requests or whatever, obviously feature request number one would be, create a game. But if you have anything over the course of this thing, feel free to just create an issue, and I kind of figure we'll just use that as a forum for this thing. So yeah, let's write some code. What do I want to do first? I guess we just... First thing I want to do is delete this file, actually. So one thing I haven't done is I haven't installed the Winforms Designer for Visual Studio. It's in preview, I believe, so I don't actually have the designer, and I'm not going to use it. Just because I want to keep this really simple. Oh, you know what I should have done? I can't believe I checked in a file called form1. It's embarrassing. There we go. Yeah, so I don't actually want to use the designer just to force myself to keep the UI simple. I want, this Winforms is it's an implementation detail at best, let's say. So I'm going to write the UI in kind of, I don't know if anyone's seen Swift UI and the way they do it, but you can kind of cheat and do the same thing in Winforms. So anyway, trains. I've done Winforms more than WPF. In fact, I haven't done WPF much, so yeah, I'm definitely more comfortable with Winforms. What's it complaining about already? Oh, see? Yeah, okay. That's what I was going to do next. More editor config. So, I've typed the first line of code, and already I'm getting complaints. It's a tough crowd. There's an fxcop analyzer that says all strings should come from resources. And that's for localization, and that makes lots of sense, but I'm not gonna. So one thing I like, excuse me, is I can configure the severity here, and you can see this is going to put this in my editor config. So this is new, I think in 16.3, and it's fantastic because it's really, like, these suppressions work with pragmas or attributes, but everything else goes in editor config. So I like that you can specify all these things in editor config as well. So I can just click say, nope, none, and that's it. So the error's gone, and if we look in our changes, we should see that, yeah, it's added this line to our editor config. So this means I'm slowly building up my editor config, which is good, but it also means I either forget to copy this back out into OneDrive, or like there's some project specific things that creep in that I don't want to copy out, so that can be an issue. The one thing with editor config that I could do, which I haven't set up, but editorconfig works in a similar way to directory.build.props, where it will look for a file in. So if we're editing, this file, then it'll look for a .editorconfig file in this directory, and it'll look for it in this directory, and it'll look for it in the next directory, etc., etc., etc. So I could probably solve that problem by having a generic one. I could actually put my generic one in the root directory of my hard drive even, but I don't like the fact that it won't be in the repository. Like, if anyone clones this, I want them to have the same rules. But so yeah, there are some interesting ways I could maybe solve that. Probably not going to bother for this project. I don't actually. I guess I should mention, since it's on GitHub now, my plan with this is to do everything on stream, just because I like that idea, and I don't like the idea of cheating, other than the cheating I'm doing by having a game all written in another language. But so I don't know if I'll accept pull requests, because that's kind of like code written off stream. Maybe if they're small, we'll do reviews on the stream or something. But yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that. But so yeah, I kind of don't expect anyone to clone this, but if they do, I want them to pick up my my settings. Anyway, I'm just gonna. So I don't actually know what autoscale mode does necessarily, but it's one of the things that is standard in all Windows Forms apps, so I'm doing it. And I'm just going to give this a size. Initialize component is not special, right? It just runs code. And in fact, when the designer opens your form, all it does is reads the initialize component method and, sort of deserializes it, I guess. It doesn't actually run it. It's a bit weird, but yeah, it reads it. But yeah, all of Winforms stuff, there's no secret hidden file in the background that works. So you can just write imperative code to create Winforms. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want a split container, because I want two halves to my form, and I want it to have fixed panel to be panel 1. So basically, I'm going to have left-hand panel for controls, right-hand panel for the actual drawing surface. I don't know, about 200. This is where a designer would come in handy for all these things, because, I don't actually know how wide I want it, but never mind. What are we complaining about? Introduce concept to no. What is CA200? Dispose. Very good. Happy with that. No, I don't want to dispose this. I wonder if this goes away if I add it to the controls. Hey, clever analyzer. Very good. UI Plus doesn't support accelerated graphics. I don't know. That's where Skier Sharp is doing the drawing, not me. This is not a graphic intensive game. In fact, in case anyone was late and wasn't sure what we're doing here, this is the JavaScript version of the game. Well, TypeScript. Ooh, that cursor support. Yeah, we're not talking fancy graphics here. I don't do graphics. I do I do procedural drawing, and in fact, I didn't do this drawing. That was James who had the idea for the game. So, yeah, I don't think we're going to have a problem, but well, we'll see. Okay, so I think that should work. Let's see what this looks like. It's building. It's very exciting. Yay! Look at that. This is a split panel. That is a very small split panel. Let's make that bigger. Okay. Anyway, let's get on with putting something interesting on here. What do we want? We want a skier view, and it's an SK control. I'm going to pause here and show off Visual Studio again. See, I don't have a using for Skier Sharp, but this still completes it, and it says, oh, look, it's going to come from here, and when I press enter, there it is up the top. How cool is that? I've been waiting for that for years. And yes, all of the resharper people are yelling in their monitors now because, yes, you had it for ages, but I don't use resharper. So that goes in panel 2. Add. The thing I like about this, I say fake Swift UI because if it was Swift UI I'd be defining more controls, and now it's not, but I like about this imperative style is just I don't have any fields on my form, it's just throw some UI at the screen. This is what I mean when I say like I find Winforms really easy to get up and running with. It's fantastic. But you know, that's because I know it, right? There's definitely people who can get up and running with WPF just as fast or faster than I can. Give it a little room to breathe. Alright, and we wanted some controls, so I want a button panel. Yeah, panel's fine. And so this is just going to be for the literal buttons on the left. And everything is filled, which makes things easier. Winforms is not living dangerously. Winforms is the safe option. But I also kind of like it's going to be an interesting test. In theory, once I'm at a certain point of functionality in the game, it should be really easy to spin up a new project, say a WPF or a Blazor or something, and it should be, you know, no more than 10 minutes work to get a new skin or a new UI of this game. So I kind of like that that's a test, and I kind of like that it's a little bit of a challenge because it's like, you know, if I wrote this in Blazor from the start, then I'd be doing it on the web, and that's probably enough, right? I can use that anywhere, I can use it on my phone, so I'd stop. I kind of like that. It's like, okay, I'm doing Winforms. It's Windows only, I know, but I do have a Mac, I do have an iPhone, right? Like, eventually I'd like to get to those platforms. So it'll be a nice test to see if I can get Xamarin or something, or whatever. Yeah, exactly. It's not dangerous because it's scared. That's right. Yeah, I'm not using system.drawing because that's less portable, and so I'm trying to keep the non-portable bits to the very thinnest shell. In fact, it's probably actually going to end up a little bit weird because things like, so a click on this SK control, I'm going to just pass those pixel coordinates straight through to the game, and the game will have to deal with pixels, which is, you know, I could probably not do that. I could have the game abstracted to a level. If I go back to I don't know why I closed it. If I go back to the game, right? The game kind of works in these cells. So I could keep everything abstracted to, I've clicked in cell 1, I've clicked in cell 2, but then that means that's more work for the Windows Forms, you know, the UI layer to do. So I'm going to keep everything, basically this one file as small as possible, and this is going to be the only Windows Forms file, ideally. We'll see. I swear I haven't cheated other than JavaScript. I don't have the finished product. So I don't know whether you watched, if any of you watched Emo Landworth's writing his compiler. It was fantastic, but it was super polished because he knew for the week what he wanted to achieve, whatever. Yeah, I have no such plan. I'm just winging it. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And using Skier is also an interesting choice because, so John Galloway was streaming this afternoon my time, and he used Unity and he created a 2D thing, and he literally, you know, grabbed a thing and he drew like this, and it created this little thing for a platformer in 3 seconds. And I was looking at it and I'm like, that is going to take me 6 weeks of development to get to the point where someone can do that. But I kind of like it. It's kind of the point, right? I'm doing it to be procedural. So anyway, right, buttons. I want to add a button. See, now I can pretend to be SwiftUI. New button. Text equals pointer. Dock to the top. And in theory, I can do that again. Oh, whoops, I need to do that backwards. Do this again. Go track. And I gotta fix that. Yay, 2 buttons. Wow, they're tiny. Anyway, the theory works. And in fact, let's just tell you what, since I'm going to wrap up in a few minutes anyway, let's do one more thing. We can add an event here, I believe. Paint surface. I haven't played around with .NET Core Forms. Reacts exactly. Yeah, so .NET Core Winforms is just Winforms. It's exactly the same. It's a different code base because this is on GitHub and it's open source, and you know the .NET framework, the .NET framework version of it essentially is not going to be worked on anymore, but it's the same. Can I clear with a color? Yes. It's the same code, so it works exactly the same as you would expect, which is good. It makes it familiar. And in fact, I said I was going to keep this as small as possible, so I'm going to do this even. Sender. I don't even want this method. Got the experimental WF toolbox. Place finish. Oh. Experimental WPF toolbox. I haven't heard of that. The WPF designer should work in .NET Core, but I don't know if it's fully featured. Anyway, look at that. Hey, it's a game. It's a game. There's a white box. Anyway, there's button bigger. I think I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead though. I honestly didn't think I'd be writing code today, so I am happy as Larry. You know what I do wish? I kind of wish I was running a console app, because, yes, a console app, I could just press F5 and I could leave this window here and it would just refresh. That's the one, like, well, it's not the one downside, but it's definitely a downside of Winforms, right? There's no, like, hot reload or anything fancy. Could probably build something, be interesting, but, yeah, having to restart all the time, that might get old. One thing the web version does, if you press this save button, it's got to autosave, so if I refresh, those tracks stay there. Doesn't save trains though, but we could do something similar like that. That will make life easier. Also, I just realized I want these to be radio buttons, not buttons. And I want the style. No, not the flat style. Has been years since I have done Windows Forms, so I can't remember button type. Oh. It's gotta be style, right? Flat style? No. Oh, appearance. Yes, button. Yeah, so it has been ages for Hot Reload is the designer. No, it's not, because it doesn't run my code. As I said, the designer interprets initialize component, doesn't run it. Creates instances of classes if you have base classes, so it runs that code, but it doesn't run the code in your initialize code. Anyway, that'll be fun to. So there was a preview build of the new Winforms Designer that I saw. What did I do? Oh, I'm still running it. See? Hot reload. Man. Yeah, there was a preview I saw where they, like the first sort of, not even a preview. State. Look at those left line labels. The first version, yeah, they hosted the designer. It had to be hosted in .NET Core process, so that makes sense. But then they wanted to look like it was in VS, so they rehosted the window in there, and they did all that, but they hadn't. It was just rehosting the window, not the designer, and so you had this thing that looked like the designer. It's inside VS, but if you click the button, it just ran the code of the button, so you just had your app inside VS. It was kind of funny. Middle center. And I do not like these. I will do that. You know how I said I wasn't using system.drawing? Apparently I lied. That is totally system.drawing. Cool! I'm going to call that a night, because we have an app, and the rest is easy, right? So now, something needs to take care of drawing on here, which means something needs to have some kind of state for a game, So create game. So we have a bare bones window with a sphere view. I never know what to put in my commit messages. Cool. Well, thank you for playing along with me. Yeah, if you have any questions or statements or comments, feel free to yell at me on Twitter or open an issue on the GitHub. If you have suggestions for the future, or if the audio's crap, or if you can work out how to play royalty-free music on Twitch so I don't have to sit here in silence, I'm all ears. Thanks for joining in, and yeah, see you next week.